More than 1 billion people in the world are living with some sort of disability. That's about 1 in 7 people on the planet. The diversity in tech movement is strong, but the conversation has only recently started evolving to include people with disabilities. At TechCrunch Sessions Justice, Matt King, a Facebook engineer who is blind, referenced a startling stat. There's a 70% unemployment rate among those who are legally blind in the US. As King said, quote, "That is just a stunning waste of human resource and completely unnecessary," end quote. It's not clear how many people with disabilities are employed in the tech industry, but the consensus seems to be that they are few and far between. Meanwhile, it's very clear that tech companies could do a lot more to ensure their products are accessible to those with disabilities. Today, I'm chatting with Erin Lauridsen of Lighthouse for the Blind in San Francisco to talk about accessibility in tech.
Lighthouse for the Blind in San Francisco is an organization designed for the blind, by the blind. Founded in 1902, Lighthouse offers programs and services including how to use an iPhone, make an omelet, and travel the world. The organization has also partnered with tech companies to ensure technology is accessible to everyone.
Thanks so much for joining me, Erin. So tell me about the work you do at Lighthouse for the Blind in San Francisco.
Thanks for having me, Megan. I'm the Director of Access Technology at Lighthouse for the Blind in San Francisco, and that involves 2 main areas of focus that run in parallel. One of those is access technology training, making sure that people who are blind and visually impaired know how to access all of the technology that they need to live their lives. And so that can be everything from just computer literacy and smartphone use to being able to use the assistive technologies like screen reading software and magnification that help people with disabilities to actually use and access technology. And then the other piece of it is interacting with technology development and technology companies and making sure that things that already exist and things that are being created are as accessible as they can be to people who are blind and visually impaired, so that when we go to use the technology, it actually works for us.
Right, yeah. How good is the technology right now? Like you mentioned screen readers, and like I know on like iPhones there's like voiceover technology. Like how good is it, would you say, right now?
It's very good. And it gets better and better to be a blind person, I think, every year as mainstream technology becomes more accessible to us. I use the same apps and like you said, the iPhone and all of the same services that you do on a regular basis, which is a big shift from how things were 5 or 10 years ago. The screen reader voiceover is very good on the iPhone, and for the most part, it works smoothly. There are certain things that developers can do or not do to make things more or less accessible, and so that's where a lot of my work comes in, is just everywhere from the ideation phase of like, we want to build something and let's make sure we're not locking people with disabilities out when we build it, to we have built something and we're at the user testing phase and let's get blind user testers in along with everyone else to make sure it actually works. So, there's things that are often very small and easy to fix, but if people aren't aware of them, they can put up barriers.
Yeah, could you give me an example of some of that stuff that that developers might not think about, but is actually like relatively easy to implement?
Yeah, a good example is labels on buttons. A lot of times in an app, you'll have an icon or a button that's just an image, and a developer might not know that you can actually assign a text label to that, so that when a person using a screen reader is swiping through their screen, they don't just hear button, they hear what that button's supposed to be. Because as good as technology's getting, a picture doesn't necessarily read itself, so it's got to have a text label.
Right, definitely. And you mentioned that that through Lighthouse you do some work with tech companies. Like I think on your bio page it mentioned like Uber and Airbnb and Google, I believe. Could you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing with those companies?
Yeah, I'll just speak to that in general terms. A lot of it is user testing. So when companies have a product that they either have out already or they're ready to release, we recruit testers who are blind, who are as diverse as anyone else you'd want testing your app. People who are older adults, people who are young, people who are novice technology users and experienced technology users who happen to be blind. and get them in rooms with companies' UX teams to see how things are working. We also do events where we'll put engineers in rooms with people who are blind and visually impaired to have that, design guidance, but also kind of empathy experience of what is, why do I have to think about accessibility standards when I code? Why does it matter? I think that gets a lot easier for developers when they meet somebody who uses their product, who uses assistive technology.
Right, and I don't want to get too deep into the woods of hiring at tech companies, but just on a broader scale, the unemployment rate among people who are blind is 70%. That's the latest stat?
That's the latest stat, and we could talk about statistics, but we won't.
Well, I guess do you agree that the unemployment rate is high?
It's
though?
high. It's definitely high.
So maybe that number has changed. I think that number came out in the 90s or something. Right. How can we decrease the unemployment rate for people who are blind?
I mean, it's a lifelong problem for people. So it starts in the education system, and it starts, my background is in teaching, in technology teaching, and so what I notice most is that it starts with literacy. If somebody hasn't had access to Braille, had access to accessible materials, a literacy gap can happen really early in someone's life. Okay. So when I'm just thinking of the world in general and what would make blind people more employable, it starts with literacy. I think once people have that education and move into the work world, a lot of it is awareness. And it's if you're the first person with a disability a hiring manager has ever met, and they spend the interview wondering how on earth you got here today and how you tie your shoes, they're probably not going to be focusing on your skills.
Right.
So part of it is an awareness problem. Okay. And sometimes it's still an accessibility problem. Sometimes we think about accessibility and the end user, and we don't think about accessibility and developer tools. I have several blind friends who are great coders, but there's certain jobs or certain roles they haven't been able to take on because the specific developer environments in those spaces haven't been accessible to them. Right. So it's a big problem with lots of solutions.
Got it. If you had a wish list or something for the tech industry, for tech companies, what would be on that list of just things, either products or services or initiatives that they could do to make things more accessible for people?
I mean, I think the thing at the top of my wish list is just how we frame accessibility and disability in general. Often it's a story that gets told in terms of inspiration or kind of a bonus thing to do. But people with disabilities are hackers. As a blind person, when I move through the world, I hack things every day to get them to work for me. And that is one thing that people who are blind and with other disabilities bring to workplaces. We're hackers and we're customers. And I mean, we're an awesome use case, right? If you can design an app for me, odds are it's probably going to work pretty well for someone carrying a latte in a baby stroller and watching their cat run off down the street, too. So I think my biggest wish list is just that accessibility not be this little compliance checkbox at the end of the process, but that it be integrated as a really key and useful part of development cycles of building things and making things, because people with disabilities are hackers and innovators, and that's what we do.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Erin. I really appreciate you coming in.
Thanks.